Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the previous couple of days, we witnessed a lot of protestings all over the world. It was all against discrimination, slavery, and we're all supporting that. But after we witnessed some protesting in UK, while students they took down one of the slave owner statues, CNN came out with a question: what about the pyramids? So my question: what about the pyramids? I never ever imagined that my first video will be answering this. You still have the same teachers who's teaching you that slaves built the pyramids? Really? Come on. Anyway, just for the people to know that this is one of the big lies which the world starts to use from years and years ago, let's start this story from the beginning. It was a man. We call him actually in the history the history father, or the father of the history. His name was Herodotus. Herodotus came to Egypt after 2,000 years of the pyramid construction, and he started to ask the people who's living around the pyramids area, what about this amazing construction? Do you have any information about it? So the people start to tell him, oh yeah. For example, the Great Pyramid. The King Khufu started making the Great Pyramid by using his people as slaves. Slaves? Yeah. He closed the temples, he prevented them from making any kind of offering, and he just used them as slaves. For 20 years he used 100,000 men. So the man told these stories from the people, like when people actually nowadays using the same fake news or stories like from social media, exactly as CNN did. So he wrote that after years we started to have a false science specifically for the Egyptian history, talking the Egyptology science. In this science, we start to know that this was one of the biggest mistakes that the people start to use from years and years. So let's know about this point by point. Number one, how many men were working in the pyramid construction? 100,000 men were working in the pyramid construction. Can I use 100,000 men as slaves? Actually, yes, but I need a lot of people and I need tools for that. Second question, can I use 100,000 men as slaves for 20 years? Most of the people might say yes. Same answer. I need more men, I need more power and more tools. Okay. Third question, can I use 100,000 men as slaves for 20 years in ancient Egypt? That's actually a big no. Why? Number one, that we are talking about less than 300,000 men were working, or less than 300,000 people were working in Egypt or living in Egypt at that time. Can I use 100,000 men as slaves for 20 years? That's quite impossible. How many women will be for those men? Another 100,000? How many kids? Maybe 60, 70,000? I'm using the whole country as slaves for 20 years. So what is the secret about it? Why those people were working in the pyramid construction? So the answer is all about a certain phenomena used to happen every year in ancient Egypt. It's called the Nile flood. The Nile flood was considered a place for Egypt because we don't have rains, but in the same time it's considered a disaster. Used to come to Egypt and covering everything, covering the houses, the factories, the farmlands, covering everything in Upper Egypt, in the south. So the people used to escape from this toward the north, toward the king, asking him, Lord, we need your help. And the king just used their condition. Hey, my people, do you have any place to stay? I'm gonna give you a place to stay. And Professor Hawass actually found in 1990 more than 10,000 houses were prepared for this job, to host those people. Do you want food? Do you want drink? Do you want health care? Yeah, I'm gonna give you health care. I'm gonna give you health care in ancient Egypt. Why? Because he need them to be 100%. So the people accepted the job. Maybe they accepted the job because they don't have another choice. Maybe they accepted the job, and I'm saying the job because they will get something in return. They are not forced for it. They accepted the job because the king in ancient Egypt was considered an image for God. Some people, they say the king was God on earth in ancient Egypt. So they actually accepted the job. They were working for the king for 3 months, and after that they go home. Wait a moment. 3 months only? Yes, that's actually why they took 20 years to build the pyramid. They were only working during the time of the Nile flood. Okay. Some people from those who's actually exchanging this story about slavery, they have to stop about that, talking about that, because if I'm using 100,000 men or that number of people as slaves every year for only 3 months, why I'm not using them like as slaves for the whole time? One more thing, I'm using them as slaves. That means I need about 3 months to collect that number, to push them and force them to work like as slaves for 3 months. Then after that, I'm checking their hand. Thank you so much for being an amazing slave. You can go home now, and remember, next year, I'm gonna actually hunt you down. I'm gonna get you to work for me as a slave for another 3 months. Then next year, it's happening. Then after 3 months in, thank you so much. I was actually enjoying whipping you, persecuting you, killing you if I have to. You can go home now, and remember, next year, same time, I'm gonna come to get you to work for me as a slave. That's actually completely impossible. That's against the human psychology, the human nature. People, they escape from country to country in the desert, and they know that 10% of them will survive. But there's hope to escape certain bad conditions in their country. People, they jump in a boat. They call it death boats. From a country to a country. Because they know that there is hope, despite the fact that 90% of them might die. There's hope. People will never be in the same place in the same time, and they expect that conditions. That's a kind of joke. One more thing. In ancient Egypt, one of the biggest gifts for an amazing worker was to have a tomb beside his lord. Why? Because the king, as we said, was a god on earth. The king is going to the heaven. Those workers were working to build the house of eternity for the king, not just a tomb. So, the king is going to the heaven as a god. If I got a tomb beside my king's tomb, that means I'm going to continue working for him in the heaven. I'm going with him in the heaven. I will get a guarantee to go to the heaven. And that would never be the case in the slavery conditions. They will never like to see that man again. So please, please, stop talking about that. There was a lot of questions and a lot of things you can ask. And before you talk about slaves, please try to find an agreement between you and those who say that the pyramids were built by aliens. Otherwise, the Egyptians will be using the aliens as slaves to build the pyramid. Please, come on. Because if you're still talking about that, if you keep talking about that, we will never stop joking on you. Come on, guys. Thank you so much.